Introduction. Does your value still exist when no one's watching? Have you ever smiled not because you were happy, but because you were afraid of being judged if you didn't? Have you ever posted a photo not to preserve a memory, but in hopes someone would hit like? Have you ever made a decision not because it felt right to you, but because it looked right to the world? If you've ever done that, you are not alone. We are living in an age where self-worth is tightly tied to visibility, to others' responses, to approving glances, to the strange silence of the crowd. We start each day not only with the goal of doing our work well, but also with the burden of appearing as if we're living well. Life now is not just about experiencing, but about performing, an existence that constantly seeks validation through outside eyes. We learn to speak carefully, express just enough, be just agreeable enough, not because that's who we truly are, but because that version is easier for others to accept. We learn not to bother anyone, and in doing so, we unknowingly teach ourselves that our feelings don't matter. We learn to succeed quickly, neatly, visibly, to avoid falling behind in a timeline where everyone seems successful. We learn to appear composed even when we are falling apart inside. And gradually we begin to lose sight of who we are if no one is looking. But if one day you disappeared from everyone's sight, what would be left of you? If no one reacted, no one judged, no one admired or disliked you, would you still live in alignment with who you are? That is the question the Stoics asked 2,000 years ago, and today it remains the question most of us avoid. We fear facing ourselves because without an outside gaze, we lose the proof that we are doing it right. But the truth is, real value doesn't need applause. It only needs to be lived. You don't need a like to know you're worthy. You don't need someone's agreement to know you're on the right path. You don't need the world to listen to know that your inner voice is real. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Look within. Within is the fountain of good." That statement is not meant to comfort, but to awaken. Awaken a self that once was whole before the world started shaping it. Because true freedom does not come from meeting others' expectations, but from the ability to live in alignment with what you know is right, even when no one supports you, no one understands, and no one stands with you. The question is no longer, what do others think of me? But rather, am I still myself if no one's watching? And if your answer is not sure, then this is the journey you need to begin. A journey of returning, not to become someone else, but to not lose what has always been within you. A journey of living without needing to be seen, yet still always holding value. Lesson 1. You don't need to be seen to be worthy. There are days when you do something good, a kind act, a right decision, a moment of personal growth. But because no one notices, no one praises you, you start to wonder, was it really worth it? You take out your earbuds, stand at the red light, surrounded by busy people, all living in a fast, hurried rhythm. You realize you just declined an invitation that made you uncomfortable, choosing to preserve your own quiet. No one knows. No one sees the fears you had to overcome, the fear of disappointing someone. There is no applause, no nod of agreement. It's just you, with yourself. And in that moment, doubt creeps in. Was this really worth it? The Stoics call this one of the quietest tests of character. Do you have the courage to live rightly when no one is watching? Marcus Aurelius, an emperor and philosopher, once wrote, "Always behave as if someone were watching, but let that watcher be your own soul." It is these silent actions, done without external observation, that truly reflect your inner values. A Stoic does not live to be seen. They do not live to be acknowledged. They do not use the light of others to define their dignity. They choose to live like a mountain, steadfast even without admiration. Because they understand every round of applause can fade, every admiring gaze can shift, but the actions you choose in silence, that is where true value is formed. The modern world will always try to convince you, if you're not seen, you don't exist. But the Stoics would say the opposite. If you need to be seen in order to believe you have worth, then you are already under someone else's control. Today, instead of waiting for recognition, choose one right action and let it be enough that you know it is right. Maybe you help someone, then walk away without needing a thank you. Maybe you silently withdraw from an argument to protect your peace. Maybe you meditate for 5 minutes, even if no one notices your growth. Every time you do that, you are laying down a quiet but unwavering foundation. You are telling yourself, I don't need to be seen by others to know I am living rightly. You don't need a stage to shine. Sometimes the most radiant thing is a person who knows how to live, even when no one's watching. In that light, it never goes out. Lesson 2. Adjusting the tone of your mind. There are moments when no one has judged you yet, but you've already judged yourself. You make a small mistake, and your mind begins echoing the usual lines. Here we go again. I always fail. Why can't I get anything right? No one needs to hurt you because you've already mastered that role. You walk away from a conversation, replaying every word you said. You prepare to try something new, but that voice in your head whispers, you're probably not going to pull it off. And you believe it, effortlessly, as if that voice were the voice of truth. But it isn't. It's just a habit. A voice you've repeated unconsciously so many times, it now feels like fact. The Stoics understood one thing deeply. The mind is where you live the longest. And if you don't learn to care for it, you will fall, no matter how calm the outside world may seem. Epictetus once said, it's not events that disturb us, but our interpretation of them. But what's even more troubling is that we don't just interpret events, we interpret ourselves with cruelty. A Stoic doesn't live in a fantasy of forced positivity. They don't say things are fine when they're not, but they also don't make themselves smaller than the truth. They learn to speak to themselves with integrity and compassion, not to lull, not to punish, but to stay steady. After a mistake, instead of saying, I'm terrible, they say, I still need to learn this. After fear, instead of I'm weak, they say, I'm practicing to become stronger. That's not pretending. That's choosing to speak to yourself differently, as a coach, not a tormentor. You cannot build a strong life on a mind that always blames. You cannot blossom if every time you fail, you uproot your own belief. Today, try paying attention to the way you speak to yourself. When you fall short, what do you say? When you're tired, how do you respond? When you want to give up, do you encourage or punish? If the answer makes you feel sad, then maybe it's time to shift that tone. No need to force false positivity. Just be fairer, softer, and steadier. Say to yourself the things you would say to a friend trying their best through something hard, because you deserve that same kindness from within. A mind doesn't need to be relentlessly upbeat, but it must be fair, because no one can survive in a house where every word is a lash. And you live inside your mind every day. Make it a place you want to return to. A true Stoic is not someone who is hardened, but someone who knows how to adjust the voice in their head toward clarity and kindness. Because in the end, the voice you trust the most should be your own. Lesson 3. Stop comparing yourself and start moving forward. It's not others who exhaust you, it's your constant comparison to them that slowly wears you down every day. You open your phone and see someone who succeeded before 30, someone traveling to a faraway country, someone glowing with happiness while you're still struggling to find a reason to get out of bed. No one says a word to you, but inside a voice begins to echo. What am I doing wrong? Why am I still nowhere? Am I just too slow? And just like that, you start doubting your own path, simply because it doesn't look like someone else's. The sad truth is, you forget that you're comparing your behind-the-scenes struggles to someone else's carefully edited highlight reel. Everyone has their own soul's timeline, a journey that can't be rushed, can't be skipped. The Stoics understood this deeply. They don't live to catch up with anyone. They don't look sideways to evaluate themselves. They look inward and ask one simple question. Today, am I better than I was yesterday? Epictetus once said, never judge your progress by the standards of someone else. Each person is fighting a battle you cannot see. The truth is, you're fighting too, with your own fears, with exhaustion no one notices, with wounds you never speak of. So why force yourself to resemble someone else when they too are hiding struggles you know nothing about? When you stop to look at others, you halt your own forward motion. And worse yet, the more you compare, the less you recognize how far you've come. You stop seeing your small victories, the quiet changes you once felt proud of. So today, try turning inward again, not to criticize, but to acknowledge, not to push, but to accompany. Write down 3 small things you've done better than last week. Maybe you slept earlier. Maybe you said no to something that drained you. Maybe you didn't run away from a fear. Whatever it is, it counts as progress, and it deserves to be seen. A Stoic doesn't race. They walk, steadily, honestly. They don't want to be faster than others, only deeper with themselves. Don't let someone else's shadow block the light quietly growing inside you. Don't measure your worth by someone else's speed. You didn't come to this world to beat anyone. You came to understand, to grow, and to live in rhythm with your own steps. Because in the end, the only person you need to surpass is the older version of you. Lesson 4. Learn to say no without feeling guilty. There are times you say okay, while inside you're screaming, I'm so tired. There are times you nod reluctantly, not because you want to, but because you're afraid of disappointing someone. There are times you help, not from kindness, but from a belief that saying no makes you a bad person. And like that, you slowly become someone anyone can ask, anyone can expect from, anyone can assign responsibility to, except you, who no longer gets asked if you're okay. You might be kind to everyone, except to yourself. The Stoics call this a kind of inner neglect, when you prioritize others' comfort over your own peace. You think you're being good-hearted, but really you're quietly harming yourself in a justified way. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Do not let your soul become enslaved simply because you fear making others unhappy." The Stoics understand that saying no isn't selfish. It's an act of self-protection. They know that if you keep saying yes to everything, you will eventually lose the one thing you can't replace: your energy, your clarity, and your self-respect. Kindness without boundaries becomes a form of unnecessary self-sacrifice. An involuntary sacrifice over time turns into resentment. That's why they learn to set limits, not through anger, but through clarity. They say no, not because they hate others, but because they love themselves enough to know where to draw the line. Today, if you're feeling tired of constantly trying to please, try something small. Choose one situation where you know you'd normally say yes just to avoid refusal, and this time say no. You don't need to give a long explanation. You don't need to apologize for listening to your own feelings. Just be steady, gentle, and honest. At first, you might feel guilty. That's normal. But remember, it's just a feeling, not proof that you're wrong. Others might be disappointed, but if they truly respect you, they will learn to accept your boundaries. And if they grow angry or distant just because you didn't comply, then perhaps the relationship was never truly fair to begin with. A Stoic isn't afraid of displeasing others. They only fear losing themselves, because in the end, no one can truly respect you if you constantly ignore your own limits. Setting boundaries isn't about pushing people away. It's about keeping yourself close to peace, because saying no doesn't close things off. It protects what matters most, your self-respect. Lesson 5. Become the person you promise to be. There's a kind of disappointment that doesn't come from others. It comes from within you. It happens when you know what you should do, when you've promised to do it, and still don't. No one blames you, but you still feel a heaviness inside. No one accuses you, but you still carry a quiet sense of betrayal, because the person you've let down is yourself. How many times have you said, "I'll start again tomorrow," only to delay once more the next day? How many times have you promised to eat better, to speak your truth, to stop giving in too easily, yet ended up back where you were? Simple things: waking up 10 minutes earlier, drinking enough water, focusing on your most important task. You know they matter, but you put them off thinking, "It's okay, I'll do it tomorrow." And that silent repetition slowly fades your belief in yourself. A Stoic doesn't live by moods. They live by principles. Epictetus once said, "Don't persuade yourself with words. Act, and let the action be your proof." A Stoic doesn't need others to believe in them. What matters more is, can they still believe in themselves? Because each time you break a promise to yourself, you send a silent message. I'm not worthy of trust. And when self-trust begins to fade, you start relying on others' opinions to define your value. You become more easily swayed, more willing to settle, more open to compromising what matters. Not because you're weak, but because you've broken too many promises to yourself. But here's the beauty. You can rebuild that trust, not through grand declarations, but through small, consistent commitments. Today, choose one simple thing you've promised to do. Don't pick something huge. Choose something manageable, enough to complete, but enough to prove that you can keep your word. Maybe it's sitting quietly for 5 minutes each morning. Maybe it's not checking your phone the moment you wake up. Maybe it's saying no when you really want to. Whatever it is, do it. Because that one action, unseen, unpraised, is the foundation for restoring belief in yourself. A Stoic doesn't promise much. They act more than they speak. They don't try to appear consistent. They become consistent by living true to their word, even when no one is watching. And when you do that long enough, you'll carry a quiet strength, not needing validation, not needing to explain. Because you'll know you are someone you can count on. You don't need anyone's approval. You just need to keep your promises to yourself, because once you do that, everything else falls into place. You don't have to become someone great. You only need to become the person you once promised you'd be. Lesson 6. Use your flaws as the foundation for growth. There are parts of you you've never dared to look at because you think they're the reason I'm not enough. Cracks in your character, mistakes from the past, reactions you feel ashamed of whenever they come to mind. They sit there, like old ink stains on a page you wish you could just tear out. Maybe you've wished before, if only I weren't this sensitive, if only I'd never been so fragile, if only I were stronger, calmer, more perfect. But the truth is, you don't need to be perfect to start building yourself. What you need is to change how you see the very things that feel incomplete within you. You may be carrying fragments, but from those very pieces, you can begin to shape who you truly are. There is a Japanese art called kintsugi, where broken pottery is mended with gold. The cracks are not hidden. They become the most beautiful part. The Stoics live the same way. They don't paint themselves as flawless. They don't pretend to be strong. They face what's broken inside, not to punish, but to take responsibility and begin again. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "What stands in the way becomes the way." A wound doesn't need to be erased. It only needs to be transformed into a lesson. Maybe you've been angry, selfish, hurtful to others. That's okay. The issue isn't who you once were, but what you choose to do with it now. A Stoic doesn't let shame drag them down. They don't make excuses either. They simply admit, I'm not yet the person I want to be, but I won't abandon myself again. If today you feel less than others, remember this. Your worth doesn't lie in perfection. It lies in your honesty with yourself and your courage to change. You don't have to hide anything. The world doesn't need a version of you that's fake just to fit in. It needs a real you, trying step by step, even with scars. Write down one thing you've been ashamed of, and next to it, write how you will begin to turn it into something better. Not instantly, not for praise, but because you deserve to see yourself as someone growing, not perfect, but real. And you'll see, the very things you once wanted to hide are what bring you closest to the deepest parts of who you are. Because that's where true strength is born. You are not defined by your mistakes. You are defined by how you choose to respond to them. The crack does not make you weak. It's where the light begins to shine through. Lesson 7. Discipline is self-respect. It's not that you lack ability. You're just breaking promises to yourself too often. Every time you set an earlier alarm to exercise, then turn it off 3 seconds later. Every time you vow not to touch your phone while working, yet scroll endlessly on social media. Every time you say starting tomorrow will be different, but tomorrow looks exactly the same. No one scolds you. No one's angry. But deep down, you know a part of you has stopped trusting. And slowly you start doubting yourself, unsure if you're capable of lasting change. The Stoics understand it's not talent that builds character. It's the ability to uphold your principles, even when no one is watching. Discipline isn't about harshness or self-punishment. It's a quiet declaration that says, I matter enough to keep my word to myself. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, a great person is one who has control over their own mind and actions, even when no one is watching. A Stoic doesn't let fleeting emotions dictate direction. They may feel tired, discouraged, or unmotivated, but once they know what's right, they do it, without applause, without an audience. And through that consistency, they build an unshakable trust, a quiet but indestructible foundation. What's powerful is, you don't need to do anything grand to become disciplined. You just need to begin with one small act and repeat it long enough until it becomes a way of life. It might be making your bed each morning, turning off your phone 30 minutes before sleep, taking a 10-minute walk every evening, or simply pausing to take a deep breath before reacting to a negative emotion. These seemingly insignificant actions are where you begin rebuilding your trust in yourself. Because with every act completed when no one's looking, you send a message to yourself, I'm worth the effort. I'm worthy of respect. Discipline isn't about draining yourself dry. Discipline is about choosing what's right, even when what's easy is calling your name. And in a world that urges you to follow your emotions, the one who can act on principle is the one who is truly free. Today, choose one thing you once promised yourself but haven't followed through on. And do it. Not because someone is watching, not to prove anything, but because you deserve to live as someone you can trust. Don't wait for motivation. Let action become the motivation. Don't wait for someone to inspire you. Be the one who inspires yourself. Because in the end, discipline is not a form of force. It is the deepest expression of self-respect. Lesson 8. Face and move through your fears. The truth is, what's holding you back isn't your circumstances. It's the fear you haven't dared to name. You know what you want to do, where you want to go, who you want to become. But the moment you take a step, a voice rises inside. What if I fail? What if they laugh at me? What if I'm not enough? And so you stop, not because you're incapable, but because you're waiting for the fear to go away. But fear doesn't vanish just because you wait. It quietly grows every time you step back. Maybe you once intended to speak your truth, but stayed silent, wanted to apply for that job, but deleted the form, wanted to walk away from a relationship that no longer felt right, but chose to endure. Not because you didn't know what was right, but because you were afraid and thought fear was a valid reason to stand still. Stoics don't view fear as the enemy. They see it as a signal. The place where you feel most uneasy is often the very frontier that needs expanding. Seneca once said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." Fear often isn't in the thing itself. It lives in the story we've made up in our minds about it. You fear rejection, failure, disappointment, but often what you fear most is the feeling of being out of control. And the Stoics understand no one controls the future. The only thing you truly own is the action you choose. Today, they don't wait until the fear subsides to move forward. They move and let courage form through each step. Today, you don't need to do anything grand. Just pick one thing you've been putting off out of fear and take a small step. If you're afraid to speak the truth, say one small part. If you fear failure, try something so small you won't run from it. If you fear not being good enough, allow yourself to show up, not perfectly, but presently. The miracle is, every time you step through a fear, no matter how small, your comfort zone expands. And with it, not only does the world feel bigger, you feel stronger. A Stoic isn't someone without fear. They're simply someone who doesn't let fear decide the direction. They acknowledge the trembling and still act. They recognize the worry and still choose to move forward. Because in the end, courage isn't a feeling, it's a decision. I will not let fear keep me in a place I no longer belong. Lesson 9. Control your finances to reclaim your autonomy. There are times when you buy something, not out of need, but because you've had a rough day. Moments you swipe your card without thinking, not from lack of financial knowledge, but from a lack of feeling in control of your life. Money, which seems like just a tool, sometimes becomes a mask, covering up inner emotions, anxiety, emptiness, the desire for momentary relief. You've told yourself before, when I have more money, I'll manage it better. But the truth is, money doesn't create autonomy, it's how you use it. No matter how much you have, that reflects whether you are in charge of yourself. Stoics don't see money as evil, Nor do they glorify poverty. They see money for what it truly is, a neutral tool that reflects your choices. Epictetus once said, "It's not wealth that makes us free, but the ability to use it wisely." Stoics do not live to spend. They live to choose. They don't buy because they're sad. They don't splurge to cover up feelings of inadequacy. They don't use money to escape emotions, but to reflect what truly matters. To them, managing money isn't about rigid calculations. It's a form of practicing inner discipline. Every time you decide not to buy something meaningless, you're sending a quiet message to yourself. I don't live by impulse. I live by principle. And that very choice makes you feel stronger, clearer, less dependent. Today, instead of setting the goal of earning more money, start with one small step. Observe your emotions before each purchase. Ask yourself, am I buying this because I truly need it or because I'm trying to suit something else? Track every expense for a week, not to blame yourself, but to understand yourself better. Set a limit for small purchases, not to be austere, but to regain a sense of agency. When you know what you're doing with your money, you're not just managing finances, you're managing your emotions, your habits, and the direction of your life. Stoics don't let themselves become slaves to consumption. They spend less, but live more. They don't buy everything they want, so they can preserve the ability to do what they truly need. And they understand that true abundance doesn't lie in the balance of your bank account, but in the freedom of not being controlled by money. Financial freedom doesn't begin with a large sum. It begins with a small decision to choose awareness over impulse, to choose principle over emotion, to choose long-term value over short-term reward. Because money won't make you stronger, but the way you use money will show whether you're in control of your life. Lesson 10. Treat your body as the home of your soul. There are days you wake up in a tired, heavy body, full of silent cries, but you ignore them. You grab another cup of coffee instead of getting enough sleep. You skip breakfast because you're too busy. You lie still for hours with tense shoulders and a blank gaze, telling yourself, "It's fine. I'm used to this." But being used to exhaustion doesn't make it normal. We're taught how to care for our appearance, but not how to stay with our body as a living being that needs love. You care for your skin but neglect your rest. You work out but ignore the whispers in your chest. You diet to please others, not to make your body genuinely healthy from within. Stoics don't see the body as something to display. They see it as a temple, a home for the soul. Epictetus once emphasized, "We do not own the body, we are entrusted with it to take care of." That's why taking care of the body is not an act of weakness, but a profound expression of responsibility. They don't train for perfection. They train to remain clear-minded. They don't eat for trends. They eat to fuel their purpose. They don't sleep out of laziness. They sleep because they understand a sharp mind requires a rested body. Stoics know you cannot have inner strength if your body is constantly neglected. You cannot master your emotions if your nervous system is strung like a tightrope. You cannot build a soul on a foundation that's crumbling. So today, instead of setting a goal to change your appearance, try something simpler. Return to your body and listen. Maybe it's drinking a glass of water slowly as a way of saying sorry. Maybe it's stretching your stiff legs. Maybe it's turning off your phone 30 minutes earlier to sleep deeper. Don't wait for your body to scream. Take care of it now, like you would tend to a garden. Gently, attentively, consistently. Stoics don't talk much about self-love. They show it through action. A healthy body is fertile ground for a resilient mind, and a neglected body will eventually manifest in silent but frightening mental turmoil. Remember, you can live in many places, but only one body will journey with you from birth to your last breath. Don't wait until it speaks through pain to start honoring it, because in the end, your body isn't a display case. It is the only home your soul will ever truly have. Conclusion: a journey back inward. Everything you've just read, from discipline, facing fear, setting boundaries, keeping promises, to caring for your body, has one thing in common. None of it begins from the outside world. It begins within you, from the way you think, the way you speak to yourself, and the choices you make in the moments when no one is watching. The Stoics don't live to change the world. They don't try to control circumstances, people, or the course of life. They understand that the only thing they can truly master is themselves. And that is how they make real impact, through quiet consistency, principled living, and an inner strength that is unshaken, even if unseen. You've walked with me this far, 6,000 words, not about how to be perfect, but about how to be real, grounded, and awake enough not to be swept away by the storm outside. We don't need to change everything at once. We just need to begin with one thing, one small thing that is right, and not betray it. Maybe it's waking up 15 minutes earlier to breathe. Maybe it's saying no when you want to say no. Maybe it's looking in the mirror and choosing not to speak harshly to yourself. Whatever it is, pick one thing and keep your word to it. Not for anyone else, but because you deserve to have someone stand by you, and that someone should be you. You don't need to be strong right away, but you do need to begin believing this. Every small choice you make today, if done with awareness, becomes a brick in the foundation of the person you are becoming. You didn't come here to be someone else. You came here to complete a journey that is entirely your own, and you will never finish that journey if you keep waiting for someone else to confirm that you're enough. So before you leave this message, quietly say to yourself, I will keep one small promise starting tomorrow. No need to prove it. No need to announce it. Just commit and quietly act. That is where all true change begins. Because you don't need anyone to believe in you. You just need to believe in yourself and keep your word.